Our next session is the panel discussion of the day, diving deep into the subject of agri-tech. Speaking on the subject of building tech-enabled agri-supply chains for global markets, we have 4 very experienced professionals from the sector joining us today. Our first panelist for today is Hari Rajagopal. A banker by profession, he represents Samunnati, a new generation agriculture value chain financing company where he leads the capital markets and strategic innovations vertical for Samunnati. Prior to this, he had a long stint with Rabobank, the Dutch food and agribusiness bank, in various capacities in corporate banking and microfinance. Sateesh Nukala is our second panelist and the CEO and founder of BigHaat India. Sateesh has over 7 years of agri-entrepreneurial experience, and his passion in technology and motivation in agriculture has led him to found BigHaat. The company is the leading agriculture inputs digital platform transforming the future of farmers in India. He also has 6 patents to his credit. Our third panelist is Shubhadeep Sanyal, partner at Omnivore. He is an investment professional with more than 9 years of first-hand experience in early-stage venture capital investing across sectors such as agri-tech, food, rural supply chains, and rural-focused alternative energy. Over the last decade, Shubhadeep has travelled across India, evaluating hundreds of companies in the agriculture and food sector for investment. Before Omnivore, he has worked with Mahindra & Mahindra, supporting their entry in the micro-irrigation space. This panel will be moderated by Hemendra Mathur, venture partner at Bharat Innovation Fund. In the last 20 years, he has focused on investment banking, management consulting, policy development, private equity, venture capital, and early-stage investing across India, South Asia, Europe, and USA. He is an investor, mentor, and board member with many agri-tech startups in India. Thank you all so much for joining us at TiECON Chennai 2020. This session is brought to you by Samunnati.
Thank you, Yashaswani. And I welcome all the panelists to the panel. Before we get into the panel discussion, let me just set the context in next couple of minutes. As we all know, that Indian agricultural supply chain is complex, complicated, mostly supply driven for a large period of time. And this has created multiple problems for farmers, for value chain members, and has resulted in low income to farmers, low productivity, a lot of wastage in the food supply chain, the pre-harvest and the post-harvest phase. So it's high time we look at integration of technology in the supply chain. And when I say supply chain, we can put it in 2 buckets. One is farm to fork, which is connecting farmer to end consumers. And second is factory to farm, which is essentially building a supply chain for farmers, mostly for agri inputs like seed, fertilizers, agrochem. I think both parts of the supply chain are extremely critical, and I would say set for a disruption with the use of technology. We already have multiple startups working in this supply chain sort of reorientation, if I can say so, with the use of technology. And I'm very fortunate to have a stellar set of panelists with me who have either invested or themselves working in building these new age supply chain models. So I'll invite my panelists to talk about it, and if I can start with Subhadeep. Subhadeep, you've been investing in agricultural supply chains for a decade now. Omnivore is one of the most prolific investors in Indian agri-tech. So I would like you to talk about what is the role of technology in building competitive, preferably globally competitive agricultural supply chain, be it farm to fork or factory to farm. And I'll also appreciate if you can give some examples from your portfolio. You've invested in likes of BigHaat, TiECON, Connect, who are essentially trying to build these new age models. Over to you, Subhadeep.
Thank you so much, Hemendra. Firstly, thank you for having me on this panel. It's great to be here at TiECON Chennai. Um, to answer your question, Hemendra, yes, at Omnivore, we are an agri-tech focused venture fund. We've been around for a decade before the term agri-tech was very popular. So it's good that we are having panels around that. I think fundamentally, coming to the point of how technology is beginning to now disrupt value chains in agriculture, and I'm just going to restrict it to our body of work and our experiences. Um, I think there are fundamentally a few themes, if we can identify a few strands. One of them is, I think, technology enables discovery, right? In a fairly big way. So if you're a large company and you're trying to work with multiple aggregators and you need a certain quality of raw material to process, I think you're able to now discover that because of a massive digital highway which is available, whether that's low cost mobile phones, whether that's a very cheap data plan, the post geo effect which we've seen in rural India, that information flow has become really, really easy. And I think that's one of the problems which tech is helping solve very easily, is enabling various stakeholders to discover each other, right? Now, whether you're a farmer trying to discover an agri input, whether you're a retailer trying to discover a farmer, whether you're somebody on the output side, on the crop output side, who's buying from farmers, buying from aggregators. So all of these many to many kind of connections are being discovered. So that is one theme which I want to put out there, that tech has definitely helped. And I think if I were to give an example from our portfolio, BigHaat is one of the outstanding examples where we have seen this company scale in a very short 8-month period or 9-month period that they've been operational, to doing about 2,000, 3,000 tons a day of trade. Um, because what they're doing is essentially trying to solve for the discovery and the trust deficit which exists between farmers and local aggregators, and kind of mandi artiya sitting at consumption centers, right? Which is basically the bulk of the trade happening. So that's kind of one kind of a model, right? Which is very digital, helps you discover things. The second kind of trend, if I were to talk about, honestly, is a theme where you're actually going and trying to work directly with farmers, right? And trying to solve for their entire problem statement. So if you're a farmer focused platform, and that's what we call it internally, is that your central customer is the farmer, right? Now, whatever that person may need for their business activities is what you solve for. And I think that cannot be achieved with a pure digital only approach. There is also a physical element to it. After all, you're delivering inputs, you're buying outputs from the farmers, you're buying the crop from the farmers, you're working with them to improve the tech that they use on the ground. And tech is not necessarily only digital, right? It also means that you're working on better advisory practices. You're able to use a lot of remote sensing now to particularly tell the farmer that what does he or she need in their field. So going down to that level, I think that's where some decent work has happened in the last 3-4 years. Again, a case in point from our portfolio, as you mentioned, was BigHaat. They've been operating in the eastern part of India, which is, mind you, the smallest of farmers in the country in terms of land holding. And today there are about 300,000 to 350,000 farmers who are active on the BigHaat platform, who interact with the BigHaat network of micro entrepreneurs to access goods, services, ranging from a seed to an insurance that they might need for their kind of plot of land, and right to the point where they're selling the output as well to BigHaat. So it becomes a model where there are multiple touch points. So it's not only digital, it's a mix of physical and digital. That's kind of the second more hands-on model that we've seen. I think the third trend where I think we see technology really impacting the agri value chains, and I think making them more globally relevant, as you said, was the whole area of using deep tech in agriculture. Well, there are a lot of people who are doing that, and some of them are doing a great job. I think the whole aspect of making quality much more objective, right, in our daily agricultural trade is extremely important, because that's where farmers will also get a benefit at a certain point of time, where they know that, if I'm producing a certain quality, I get a certain price. Today, the way the market runs is it's extremely amorphous of how a buying selling decision is happening. There is subjectivity, and so how do you solve for that? You're using computer vision. There are people who are using spectral sciences, to enable any buying selling kind of intersection to have objectivity and pricing transparency for all stakeholders. And some of the companies there are, of course, Intello Labs, which works around perishables like fruits and vegetables. There is AgNext, which works around staples, things like milk, tea, coffee, and these are all very large $1 billion trades which happen from India, where the growers are like really small farmers who then can move up the value chain if they at least know the price of their commodity, right, and can be fairly dealt with. So I think these are some of the three broad trends that we definitely see, which are trying to improve upon the supply chains which are there, make them more efficient, more resilient, and I think building an intimacy between the end consumer and the farmer. That's where I think technology becomes extremely important. So I mean, and there's more, but these are the things which get out and jump out.
Thanks, Subhadeep. It's a wonderful summary of tech intervention, discovery through digital highways, importance of physical along with digital as far as rural market is concerned is extremely critical. Thanks for highlighting that. And of course, the quality assaying opportunities which exist. And I personally believe if we have to touch $100 billion export market target, which the government has set for itself, it can't happen without a very robust quality assaying infrastructure and tech intervention. And we are fortunate to have like AgNext and Tallo and Agritech, etc., who are working on it. So, thanks, Subhadeep. Let me move to Hari now. Hari, we all know Samunnati, the role it has played in value chain financing, one of the most successful NBFCs in agricultural space in India. How do you see Samunnati scaling up agriculture financing to value chain members and potentially farmers with the use of technology?
Sure. And thank you for the very kind words, Himendra, but we are still a very small organization, which is probably an adjustment error in the overall scale of Indian agricultural finance, and so much more journey to cover for us. But the way we have tried to cover value chain finance, which we thought was a missing piece in the way agriculture finance is done, is on one hand, we are working with farmer collectives, where we're trying to leverage the power of aggregation, the power of scale, and then make the smallholders connect with market entities, whether on the input side or the output side, with greater efficiency, with better terms of trade. On the other hand, we're also working with agri-enterprises that are demand generators, and then which are channeling this produce, which is coming from the FPO or FPO aggregators towards the user, whether it is through a trader channel, a modern trade channel, a mandi channel. Now, given that we have been providing two dimensions of services, one is financial solutions, working capital largely, but also catalytic infrastructure credit and market linkages, because we are helping buyers and sellers discover each other. We have now identified the startups as a key cog in the wheel, which somewhere connects between the FPOs and the agri-enterprises. Now, we have been engaging with a large number of startups in the past also. In fact, as Subhadeep was speaking, I was just making my own notes that many of the portfolio companies of Omnivore are also our loan customers and our market linkage customers. Of course, we also have a relationship. We work with BigHaat, with Stellapps, with Arya. We have worked with Cool, with very many interesting companies on agtech, ag supply chain side. And why we believe working with startups is important to the whole dimension of value chain is the first role which the startup space is playing and then the agtech space is playing is connecting innovations with the FPOs. Now, why that is important is without some innovation on the distribution side, the way inputs are delivered to the FPOs, the way produce is evacuated, what is the produce you are going to generate for the market, what is the quality control, what is the warehousing. Startups are playing a very important role, which makes the FPO produce that much more relevant for a big basket, for a Reliance Retail, for an EDM or a Cargill. So that's one dimension where startups are playing a huge role. There is a disruptive role they are playing on the supply chain in terms of increasing the number of channels available for FPOs to give their produce. So one, dissemination of innovation; two, distribution channels itself multiplying, bringing the non-linear scale to the FPO and FPO buyers. I think these are very key dimensions. And given that we had engaged with say more than say 100 startups over the last couple of years in a bilateral manner, we decided to bring a platform approach to the startup space, which not only has financial solutions, which not only has market linkages, but also has solution deployment as a service, wherein we are helping the startups connect with the farmer base through the FPOs and connect to deploy their solution at scale, because that's the gap. The FPO doesn't understand the technology enough. They feel what is in it for us. The startup is not able to access farming or farmer base at scale because that's not what their expertise lies in. So we decided, why not be the plug point, so to speak, of startups into this space, and we launched a small platform called Samaram. Now it is meaning the beginning, but it's a platform which brings three services: financial services, market linkages, and solution deployment for startups. We launched this on the 15th of August. And in the last 2 months itself, we've had a number of interesting startups registering on the platform. They are from fintech, processing, livestock, hydroponics, artificial intelligence, IoT, and then even on the inputs advisory and warehousing side. So a huge amount of interest has been generated on this platform, and now we are trying to make we are putting our internal systems in place as to how to start getting these trials in place for solution deployment and how to give the bespoke working capital solution. So we think there's a huge future, and we can make a sizable portfolio, but also connect a significant number of FPOs and agri enterprises with the startup. So the future looks promising, and to say it is not just something good to do, it is possible to do it at scale on viable terms for all parties, where the incentives are aligned. So that's the way our model has operated, and we feel the same model is now ready to come to the startup space as well.
Thanks, Hari. I clearly see Samunnati playing a role of a system integrator. We don't have too many in the ecosystem, and bringing FPO and startup world together, which I personally believe are very symbiotic. And there's no reason we should find a way to bring them together and create scale and hopefully more adoption of technology. So great work, Hari. You said the scale of Samunnati is an adjustment error. It gives me so much of optimism, that there's so much of room to grow then. So keep doing good work, and of course, you have a role to play in building tech-enabled supply chains in India with your intervention.
Yes, please.
Next is Sateesh. Sateesh, founder of BigHaat. I've been part of BigHaat journey since very beginning. Sateesh and Sachin have built it with a lot of passion and commitment, and also demonstrated that farmers do order online, farmers do adopt technology, right? So Sateesh, would be very interesting to learn from you. What kind of tech adoption have you seen from farmers, and how do you see BigHaat model sort of scaling with improving tech adoption among farmers? You can comment on that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Hemendra, for the kind words, and thanks for having me in this panel. So just to give a bit of journey, how we started off all this, like somewhere in 2014, where we spotted a huge vacuum when we were looking into value chain and technology enablement. So the space in agricultural input supply chain. So not many companies around, not many were focusing, but a lot of other players, they were looking into from farm to fork kind of technology enablement solutions. So that's where we felt, these are serious, kind of an opportunity, and where farmers are spending kind of 80% of their time in the pre-harvest journey, and that basically is determining the earning potential for the farmer, and where they need quality inputs and very highly relevant and personalized crop advisory. But unfortunately, in the current front end, what we have seen is it's a very highly fragmented and unorganized. And what is happening is, because of that, it's leading to a broken journey for the farmer in the entire pre-harvest, and where farmer is basically provided with a lot of unwanted inputs and non-technical advisory, and ending up with higher cost, and finally, lower earnings per acre for the farmer. But what we wanted to do at the BigHaat, so we wanted to transform the future of farmers. How we can, entire the journey of the pre-harvest, we can make it easier for the farmer, and offering right kind of products, high quality products, and quality crop advisory, and making sure that the farmer, is growing the crop, and earning the right yield and the right income. Right. So we initially we launched around 2015 with one category, like we wanted to just test the waters, right? So with the seeds as a category, and since that category has a lot of problems, where availability issues, quality issues, and it's a very primary and very important input. And there is a strategic reason also for us why we launched. When a farmer is transacting, or even browsing for a seed, we know that what kind of farmer and what kind of crop that he is managing, right? So that gave us the complete visibility about the opportunities and what farmers are looking for, and what kind of requirements for the farmer in the downstream, right, in terms of crop advisory and also the products. So that that's where we started leveraging the data. So based on the transactions, our engagement by the farmers, and that data helped us to engage with the farmer in the downstream, offering a lot of advisory, like what kind of practices and methods. We have seen huge gaps with what farmer is doing versus what farmer is supposed to do. So that data really helped us to kind of build the trust, and also channelize entire crop advisory in the right manner with the farmer. And of course, we had a lot of challenges very initially, because we were talking about early 2015, where we did not have a rural digital ecosystem. But the kind of opportunity what we have seen is, in the urban, how the penetration happened, how the evolution of internet and e-commerce happened. So we felt like one day definitely we would see the same kind of penetration, and the kind of growth that would happen in the rural. So that is what exactly we have been witnessing now. In the last 2 years, we have seen exponential growth in our digital, the traction. Now over 2 million farmers are accessing the platform annually, engaging for the crop advisory and also purchasing the inputs. And we are also going about making the partnerships, building the partnerships with lot of organizations, including Samunnati, as Hari was pointing it out. Okay, so they are building the gap between connecting to the farmers, and also because that is the business model. So how can we leverage their business model in order to build the farmer engagement at a scale? So this is about the partnership that we have been actively scouting for, and that is really working out well for us in order to build the trust and gain the traction.
Thanks, Satish. This is very useful. At ThinkEg, we did a study on agtech investments in India, and as one of the outcome of the study was that out of 150 million farmers in the country, about 14 million odd have adopted some agri-tech solution, which is just about 10%. So again, I would say there's enough room for growth, and as Subhadeep mentioned, that once the digital highways open, hopefully the adoption would go up further. Prime Minister announced the broadband connectivity to all the 600,000 villages in the country. I think those could be game changers. We already see farmers being very comfortable with WhatsApp, Facebook, YouTube kind of models, and I personally think a combination of video, vernacular, and voice. If you integrate these into a business model, your ability to reach out to farmers, work with farmers, convince farmers probably goes up a little bit more. So let me come back to Subhadeep again. Subhadeep, if you look at the agri-tech startup ecosystem, we see two kind of startup. One is supply chain startups like BigHaat or a BigHaat, or a BigHaat, who are trying to integrate tech in building these models to make supply chain efficient, transparent, demand driven. That's one category. And second is more like a pure tech startup, like of Intalo or a Cropin or a Setshore, who's offering a tech solution and now trying to get into supply chain, right? What's your view in terms of scalability of these two kind of startups? It looks like if you to scale up in the agricultural supply chain, the integration part is very critical. But it's very difficult for a pure tech startup to start building supply chain expertise, right? So, do you have any view on this?
So it's a very interesting question, Hemendra. Thanks. It's something which we discuss internally each day. I think fundamentally, if we look at companies which need some time for their product, for their tech product to mature, and that could be anything. That could be robotics, which Start and Sense, for example, is building for smallholders. That could be the examples you mentioned. That could be some IoT player like a Fasal trying to do micro advisory and of pests and all. But I think the fundamental challenge these guys face is how to get to a certain number of farmers quickly, right? And that becomes the problem for kind of everyone, more or less. For a quality player like an Agnext or Intello, the problem is how do I get to so many people, may not be farmers, but maybe people who are at the intersection of buying and selling from a farmer, right? The question again is, I think, points to what Hari was trying to say, that how do we aggregate demand in a way, right? And that's where I think most of the pure tech startups, once they are done with their building phase, that you're in a corner, you're building tech. Now once you're done with that, how do you take it to market, right? And that's, I think, one of the key pieces, and that is what is going to differentiate, I think, the winners, quote unquote, from this from this layer to the ones who may not do so well, because building tech is great, but ensuring the utility of that, using that, is another problem altogether. And I think at some point or the other, partnering, because doing everything yourself, as you said, I mean, the DNA might not be there, and it is kind of it's kind of pointless sometimes. But I think the game lies in partnering with other people, because this is such a massive market, both India and globally, that for one company to really dominate, from one startup to really grow into domination, it's going to take a long time, and it won't happen without collaboration. So I don't think, or I don't know of any pure tech startup today, even globally for that matter, which has done really well on scalability but has not partnered, right, with somebody on the value chain side, somebody on the supply chain side. There are very, very few companies who have built in, become like a trade player themselves, and they started with deep tech. So one natural progression is that, yes, these guys also will at some point become partners or players in supply chains where they're assuring certain things. But I think at the core of it lies, collaboration. And I think these last 18 months or 15 months has really kind of nudged people that way, that, guys, we've now built something very exciting. It works. It's robust enough. Now, how do we take it to, 15 crore farmers in the country? And that, I think, people are increasingly realizing won't happen without collaboration. And it's the same for the other guys, right? Somebody who's just trading is now realizing that, listen, if I need to move up the value ladder, right, I can't just trade at 2%, 4% gross margins anymore. I also need a guy who can help me with traceability. I need a guy who can ensure that there is a blockchain which guards the transaction if I'm doing exports, for that matter. So those, I think, somewhere people will start to work with each other, whether by design or by default. But it's one of those things where and in the process, I think, from a purely investor point of view, I think we'll also see some M&A happen around these this market need at some point in time, right? That's kind of a bit of crystal ball gazing, but yeah, I do see that happening.
Absolutely. I think there's a huge opportunity for consolidation, which is good for investors. And my guess is investors going to drive a lot of it.
Yes, hopefully.
It could be corporates who are who see value in working with multiple startups, and there are quite a few corporates who are building these platforms. So totally agree. I think it's ultimately collaborative approach, irrespective of which part of the supply chain you are starting from, or you're a pure tech player trying to build a trade model, or a trade model trying to get into some bit of tech. So that's a great point. Hari, now agri fintech is kind of emerging as a new buzzword. There's enough of fintech that we have seen in urban areas and kind of getting saturated, crowded. And on the other hand, in rural areas, we have huge opportunity. Priority sector lending in agriculture is about almost $180 billion, and post-harvest financing is another huge opportunity which we haven't really touched, despite some good work by some of the warehousing and collective management companies. And again, the challenge is, there are a few startups who are good at farmer onboarding, some are good at credit scoring, some are good at risk assessment, mitigation, and some are good at loan recovery. But there's no one single sort of startup which can do end-to-end, right? How do you see, we are in conversation with multiple private sector, public sector banks, and they're very keen to see, can they disrupt the whole agri value chain financing with adoption of these innovation? Do you see that kind of trend picking up? And of course, Samunnati has demonstrated success in some ways. But what's your view next 3 to 5 years? Are we going to see a different agri fintech model altogether than what we have seen over the last few decades?
No, I think a lot of these models, you're right, have kind of now been around for some time and been around for enough time to generate confidence in the stakeholder communities. And by stakeholders, I'm meaning, say, insurance companies, I'm meaning, say, banks, financial institutions. And certainly 2 or 3 things are coming up with some clarity. One is that the crop monitoring using, say, remote sensing, satellite imagery, that is kind of taking off in some way. One of our customers, SatSure, which is a loan customer for us, has recently, signed a huge contract with ICICI Bank for the crop loan monitoring of their pan-India loan portfolio. They were doing it, I think, in some states, and they've scaled up to a national partnership. So a bank like ICICI Bank getting comfortable with a technology which can help them do the entire crop loan portfolio monitoring, I think is an important development. I think as Samunnati, what we have tried to do is we've done an end-to-end contract farming kind of project in AgriBuddy, which is again a startup where BigHaat was helping us on the input side to provide that. AgriBuddy was doing the helping out on the market evacuation side. And we had WRMS, which came up with an insurance facility, and they provide end-to-end monitoring of this. Which is a tech-enabled end-to-end kind of lending to the farmers kind of project. So we've done that. We've also done pilots with, say, Cropin again for say, developing the FPO profiles and seeing as to how the FPO lending, how can we monitor it better over a period of time. I think, and of course, we are trying to roll out on the warehousing side a program with ARIA where we can, not only do warehouse financing, but can we also do better collateral management using technology. We are in talks with Whirl for similar kind of projects. So definitely, I would say, in terms of the acceptance by mainstream insurance companies, by mainstream banks, that is increasing. Our own projects with various startups have also reached some scale. So it is no longer a small boutique pilot, but it is something which is capable of going, and we are now facing the next hurdle of, operational hurdles which happen the next scale, which means we are on the right track. So the fact that we are getting there also means the interest of stakeholders in making this work at scale in the real Indian circumstances, I think is coming. So definitely there is a strong potential. I think lending through fintech is something which is now catching up in our circumstances. We are in discussions with some of the fintech companies of can we lend to, say, farmers, aggregators through these enterprises, through these startups. and can then we in turn, use these pools to securitize, to access, more capital. These are some interesting discussions going on, wherein if through Samunnati, we can access much cheaper capital to enter these asset classes, as in lending to farmers, lending to small aggregators, MSMEs, and this has all happened in the non-agri space. You have some wonderful stories, where you have Flipkart anchor-based financing, supplier-based financing. You've had supplier finance in the large corporate space, where if you're a AAA anchor, your vendors get financing at very, very competitive rates. But we are trying to move this down to lower anchors, and technology is making it happen. There, where we are trying to use fintech-based lending to create a loan and then go back and securitize. So these are some very interesting conversations and discussions going on, and all capable of gaining a critical mass. So we see a lot of potential.
Thanks, Hari. Thanks, Hari. So I know we are running out of time, but I still have two questions for Sateesh, and after that maybe we can wrap up. Sateesh, Hari talked about building fintech integration into value chain financing, and I believe a lot of input sales in India happen on credit, right? Whether it's formal credit or informal credit. I think more informal credit, I guess. So how do you see credit being an important parameter to scale some of the tech-enabled solution which likes of BigHaat are implementing? And second, I think again, which Subhadeep talked about, building a collaborative platform, and we've also seen convergence of a lot of agri-input platforms with output platforms, right? And some output platforms moving towards input and things like that. Do you see that's going to be very critical, where these output input models kind of converge at some level and become more full stack? So if you can comment on these two issues.
Yeah, sure, Hemendra. So these are very valid points, which is very important for the farmer. One, to give the accessibility to lending, and also accessibility to market linkages. So we have been, of course, actively looking for right partners, including Samunnati. How we can extend, the loan to the farmers. So we have two models, like where digital model, feet on street model. So we have done a pilot last year with Samunnati, extending the loans to the farmers, where we have been working with these farmers to provide the inputs and also the crop advisory. And on the market linkages, we tied up with AgriBuddy, where we can provide the market linkages. So we have seen good success there, wherein we were not only giving the inputs, but also integrated crop advisory and entire digital platform for engagement. And we have seen a lot of happy customers, happy farmers out there. But the same thing replicating digital, okay, it's a challenge definitely, because the diligence we are talking about. Okay, so how can we use the kind of data that we have been gathering and build the insights and see the credit, the profile of the farmer, credit, worthiness of the farmer. So that is something that we have been thinking, for last few months, and understand the gaps, and of course address those gaps, and run kind of a pilot. So we have been even talking to Rabobank, for their pilot. So we'll have to see how that it will evolve. But in the future, definitely for us to scale, of course, we are talking about like 30 to 40% of huge market, in cash market, that is going in the cash market, right? For us that is important right now. But at the same time, we need to look for these opportunities of building the models and platform, extending the credit, and also discovering. Or giving the access to the farmers to discover the market linkages and potential buyers. So these where the technology has to play a big role, because the scale comes only with the technology led access, but not with the physical or feet on street.
No, that's great. I think we are out of time, so I think it's time to conclude. So all I can say is a big thank you to all the panelists for some wonderful points and remarks. I learned quite a lot on this panel, very frankly. Thanks to TiECON for arranging this panel. All I want to conclude is by saying that agricultural supply chain is up for disruption, and it can't happen without technology. Right? And thanks to COVID, I know it's done a lot of harm to everyone and to the economy, but I think it has also kind of pivoted the adoption of technology across the entire agricultural value chain, right? And despite lockdowns, despite COVID, we have seen record Kharif sowing, we have seen record Rabi procurement. I think technology did have a role to play, even if it was small. And the fact that government is realizing the role of tech now, and we're going to see multiple public market interventions now. Agritech is under development, and there's a lot of emphasis on enabling models which can give farmer the freedom to sell anywhere, anytime, at any price. I think again, role of commodity exchanges, market platforms is going to become more and more important. So yeah, I think with that optimism and hope that we take Indian agriculture to a global scale, where we can not just make these tech solutions for India, but hopefully take them to other markets too. We have a huge population of smallholder farmers, and so is Africa, and so is Southeast Asia. So I'm sure solutions that we're developing in India are pretty much portable to any other part of the world. So with that, I once again thank you all and wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for such an engaging session, bringing alive the nuance and detail of the sector in such an easily relatable fashion.